I wanted to start with a little bit about early intervention and just say that it is so important to catch students early on who are just a little bit behind before the gap gets way too wide. Because once it gets too wide, it is hard to try to catch up those kiddos. And that is why early intervention with kindergarten, first grade, second grade is so important. Hi, I'm so excited to be here for the ins and outs of intervention groups for K-2. So I just want to say welcome and thank you for spending your time with me. Um, like she said, my name is Keri Brown. If we've never met before, nice to meet you. So let's get started. But first, I always say anyone who comes to anything that I do or I meet, once we do something together, we are friends for life. So let's be friends. If you have questions about anything after, you can just send me an email. It is Keri@enchantedkindergarten.com, or you can just find me on social media. It is Enchanted Kindergarten, same on Facebook, Instagram, all the things. But make sure you do it with a D because I'm always difficult. And so it's not kindergarten with a T, it's a D like a flower garden. So just make sure you type that or I will never, ever see your email. All right. That is my website if you are looking for that. But here is a little bit about me if you don't know me. I've taught kindergarten and first grade my entire teaching career. I live in Alabama, and you can't tell my voice is a little tired from being at school all day. So the country twang is definitely about to come out. I apologize. I have my master's and bachelor's degree in elementary education. This is my 17th year, and I honestly think it feels like my first or second because I'm always learning new stuff. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I'm there with you if it feels like a brand new year. I'm there. I'm currently an interventionist at a K-2 school. And I just have to say, if you ever get a chance to do intervention, absolutely go for it, do it. It is probably the best job I have ever had in my life. And I have one child that I actually birthed out of the womb. Her name is Lola, and she clearly is her mama's child because the picture on the right, she has a little bit of RBF, just like me. If you've ever met me, I'm always happy, but my face never looks happy. So this is definitely my child out of my body. All right, let's get to it. So I wanted to start with a little bit about early intervention and just say that it is so important to catch students early on who are just a little bit behind before the gap gets way too wide. Because once it gets too wide, it is hard to try to catch up those kiddos. And that is why early intervention with kindergarten, first grade, second grade is so important. Whoops. All right. Well, didn't mean to do that. There we go. All right. All right. So the goal today is to leave knowing where to start and what to do with your intervention time. So I currently, well, I will say I was hired as a math interventionist, but this year I'm actually doing both reading and math. I'm not like super excited about it, but it's totally fine because I do love reading, but math is where my heart is. And I just wanted to share how our school does intervention. So currently, we pull two different sets of children, and our reading interventionists are a little bit differently. So there's actually 2 reading interventionists at my school, and there's 2 math interventionists. And this is the first time I've ever been in a school that does it the way that we do it for math. So what we do is we take children for enrichment, so kind of middle of the line children, and we pull them 3 times a week. And then we take tier 3 children or children who are already on PST, and we pull them 2 times a week, and then their teacher does the other 3 times a week, just so we make sure we're hitting those middle of the road kids. Because what happens at a lot of schools and schools that I've been at, everything is focused on children who are like way, way, way behind, and all the energy goes toward them. And sometimes it happens that those middle of the road kids kind of start going down, down, down because they aren't getting as much focus as they need. So we are trying to prevent that by catching those kids who are right like on the borderline. And so we are starting to, pull them, but we're calling it enrichment and not so much intervention, but they're still falling under intervention. But we don't want to scare the parents by saying your child needs intervention. So we're going with enrichment. All right, so to get started with intervention, I just kind of wanted to share how we do it and the steps that we take to pick our kids and how we assess and what we do. So we do it in 4 things. We have a meeting, we assess, we have another meeting, and then we create our groups and our schedule. So I'm going to go through those pretty quickly with you all. So for step 1, we meet with the coaches. We actually have 2 math coaches, which also is pretty rare. So at the school that I teach at, we have 13 kindergarten, 12 first grade, and 11 second grade. We did have 12 of each the previous year, but as different students and attendance, it's kind of shifted. And so then we ended up getting another math coach, which is absolutely amazing. So now we have like a little math department, 2 interventionists and 2 math coaches. So we all meet and we kind of determine what the plan is. We take a look at last year's, all the data from all the things they did, and we look at standards, and then we get together and create an assessment. And what we're doing this year is very different from what we did last year because of the data. And the kids this year, I think, are further along than the same grade kids we had last year. So it's kind of nice to be like, okay, well, we see it's a little different, but where is the need this year? And so we kind of shifted where we're doing this year. And then once we are looking at all of the data, we kind of determine, well, what do we need to make with an assessment? What kind of data do we need to tell us? And so as we look at the standards and things like that, we try to see, okay, what should they have mastered? And so then we go in and think, well, what's a good skill that would be good for them to work on now? So once we're looking at the standards, looking at what they did last year, looking at where they should have mastered, that's where we kind of decide, okay, well, these kids were low in these areas on end of the year assessments. Let's go in and assess the entire grade level and then see how they do, because this is where we want to focus right now at this time of the year. So that's kind of how we make our plan. So for example, for first graders, you may think about what they should have mastered in kindergarten, and then this is the same idea for second grade. So for example, in first grade, you may look at, okay, I know in kindergarten they should have been counting to 100 by ones and tens. Maybe we'll put that in an assessment. Or are they fluent within 5 with subtraction and addition? That may be where the focus is. Or are they able to do combinations of 10? So just some examples of things you want to do. You also may want to think, well, when we go in to start doing intervention and enrichment, do we want to front load information with these students? This isn't something we're doing, but it may be something you may want to do at your school and talk to your team and do more front loading. We're not doing that. We're trying to just fill in the gaps of just areas we see that they need a little bit of help. And y'all, when I tell y'all the way we're doing this just blows my mind. I'm just so excited for all of the kids that we're able to see instead of just students who are on tier 3 or, already have a PST, spot. It is amazing, like how we're able to get so many kids. So then we go into doing assessments. And of course, I absolutely love using ESGI. And something that's a little bit different that you may not hear from everyone else, I have a different type of account. I am actually using the specialist account. And oh my gosh, if you are intervention, if you are a SPED teacher, if you see groups of children from different places, I highly suggest that you contact ESGI and switch over to the specialist account, because then I am able to put in all of my kids and keep up with all of my data. Y'all, I mean, ESGI already blows my mind all the time, but then once I started doing this, like completely mind blown again. All right, so let's take a look at the specialist account very quickly. So once we think about what we're doing, you're going to go into your account. You're going to get started. If you do not have an account already, which hopefully you do, you're going to make sure you get signed up and get an account with ESGI. And you can use the code Enchanted for a trial of that. And then under the specialist account, I do this probably in a way maybe other people don't do it. You can do this in many ways, but I go in and I add in teachers' names, or you can do like groups, and then you'll go in and add in your students' names. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So my account looks a little bit different, and I am going to zoom in under where it says specialist account in a second. But it looks very similar. Now, mine hasn't been updated to the new beautiful version of ESGI because I am under the specialist account. But that's fine by me because it saves me loads of time. So I can still see all of my district's common assessments and everything that we have shared within my district. All that is at the top. I pretty much ignore all of that because I don't need it. I do my own tabs. And so at the very end, it says add such subject tab. This is where I put in all of my assessments that I need for all of my groups of enrichment and intervention students. And under each tab, you can put in different assessments. So just because I may have like one group of second grade, I can have a completely different tab with different assessments for my first grade. And then if I end up later in the year picking up kindergarten, I can have a completely different tab, and then all of my kindergarten assessments are under there. Or you can do it however you want to. It may be students from first and second grade who are working on the same skills, and then you want to put all of those assessments under one. Whatever works best for you. Mine works easiest because we are grouping by grade level and we're working on particular skills. And so it's easier for me to just put in certain grade levels. But I do have pretty much 4 groups: a first grade enrichment, first grade intervention, and then the same for second. So a second grade enrichment and second grade intervention. So eventually that will be 4 different tabs because they're doing 4 different things. All right, so this is a little zoomed in on the side. I know it probably was hard to see, so I thought, let me zoom in so you can see that instead of just having your kids listed down, if you have a regular ESGI account or you've seen a regular ESGI account before for just the teacher, the specialist looks a little bit different because you can group students in different ways. There are also some other things that I haven't used before, but y'all, I am just getting started with it, so I probably will be using some of those other features, but this is all I have needed so far, was just to be able to group my students by the way they're coming to me. And so what I do is group them by teacher because that's easiest for me, but I will show you that in a minute. Then you can go in and go through the test explorer, because once you've met with your team, y'all decide what you want to assess, then you can come and see if there's already a test under the test explorer, and then you could just type in what you need and go from there. And then on the side right here, you can see where I have one teacher A. So I'm doing that is like first grade, and then I'll have that teacher's name, first grade, that teacher's name, second grade, so that I can easily see. And so then you can just go in and add in your assessment that you need. And so usually I just hit add test, go from there, add in my test, but I'm doing add a new tab. And this is just how easy it is to go in and do it. So I'm doing first 9 weeks math intervention, and this is when we test the entire grade level. So then I can have all of everybody under that same little thing of where I'm testing everyone. And then I can go in and either create a test on my own, or I can go and look to see. So for example, if I wanted to assess all of first grade on counting to 100, because they should have mastered that in kindergarten, I can go in and make a test for this. Now, the thing I like about ESGI is I can go in and do a single score. So it doesn't have to be that yes or no. And then I can just type in when I'm assessing each child, wherever they stop counting, that's what I put in for their score. We have so many kids that are counting 25, 26, 27, 28, and they all stop at 29 and then jump to like 90. I don't know why. It is wild. So then I just type in 29, and then in my notes, I go in and I'll put they skipped to 90 or whatever it is. Or if they're counting and they say 29, 31, I'll just type in my notes that they skipped 30. And then they kept going and they stopped at whatever it is that they stopped at. But I like to say that they made the error at 29 or whatever it is. And then I just go into that assessment, I do put in an intro page, because if I ever need to share this test with someone, then it's already created where somebody else would know what it means. So I do put in just a little intro page. And then since my students aren't looking at anything for this test, I just put count and then put count as high as you can. And that's the only question. And then that's where I can type in where they scored, or how high they got on counting to 100. And then the test is created, and it was that quick. I did go a little slower because I knew I was recording this for you all. But then your test is there, and now it is under that tab, and I can go in and start assessing students. Now, on the other hand, if you're like, I really don't want to make my own test, you can go in and find tests, like I said. So you can go through ESGI's Test Explorer, and then you can just type in the name of any test that you may be looking for, or you can go in and do like a yes, no. So this is for make a 10. You can make your own if you want to, but when I'm thinking about making a 10 assessment, there are way too many questions. So I like to go over and then just filter by math or whatever it is I'm looking for. And then I can type in make a 10. I love that you can preview them. So then I just click on them quickly to see what the test look like. Find the one that is more like what I need. And then if I don't see anything, that's when I'll just go in and make a test on my own. And more likely than not, I can find what I'm looking for, unless my math coach is very specific in the questions that she wants to give our students. Then I'll change it to, fit what we need at our school. But it is so easy to go in and find your tests, find your assessments, find what you need for your kids, and then go ahead and start assessing everyone. And the reason at my school that we assess everyone is because since we are such a large K-2 school, we have so many different teachers who assess in different ways, and it's just easier if we all do the assessments and we know how we're scoring them. Also in this video, I wanted to share the rubric. If for some reason you want to do a rubric instead, this is also an option. I have not played around with the rubric enough to tell you all about it, but I did want to share that that is also an option of the type of assessments that you can get or create through ESGI. All right, now step number 2. Then we go in, we assess the entire grade level. So in our case, we don't test kindergarten until middle of the year because they haven't learned anything yet. And so like last year, I ended up doing kindergarten later in the year, and we worked on counting the first group of children that I got. We just practiced counting. And then I started with a group working on addition fluency. And so we worked on that. And then I switched to subtraction once we started doing that. And it was, really nice to get back with kindergarten. But I do really love working with first and second grade as well. But right now, we just tested all of first and second grade students. And then for step 3, we go and we meet about all the data. So if you use ESGI to assess every child, all of this information will be in ESGI. Grouped for you, sorted for you, all of the charts, all of the data, all of the everything is already there, all of your notes, all within ESGI. And then we go ahead and start grouping students by certain criteria of whatever skill we were looking for. And we kind of put them in 3 groups. So children who do not need to be pulled, these are students that show mastery in the tested skill, or they scored, in a range that we were okay for, even if they didn't get 100% on assessments that we did. We also think about children who would be in intervention. This is anyone who failed the mastery or is already on PST, getting tier 3, and they're kind of like our children who were on PST or tier 3 last year. They're automatically in intervention. And then there may be some certain cases where we're like, I think they'll do well in intervention as well. And then we'll go ahead and put them with that group. All of our first grade students who scored a little bit below where we would have liked, we put them in the intervention group, since we do tier 3 a little bit differently at my school than I've done at any other school. And so there's not any automatic tier 3 for first grade at this moment, at the beginning of the school year. And then we have students who may fall under the enrichment, where they almost got it, but there's just something they need to work on, and we kind of can figure out what that is. And we'll try to see, if there's a bunch of children that are all missing this same one little skill, then that's what we start practicing first. And so then we'll put those students in enrichment. And so these are children who did not master anything, but they didn't do like so poorly on the assessment that they would need a ton of help. These are children who are movable, who, if they do whatever assessment your school does or your state does, they usually score a little bit below on that, but not, terrible. These are the children that we want to start pulling for enrichment to just kind of help. We do ACAP in Alabama, and for second grade, we will eventually start working on some of those things that they'll be needing for ACAP, especially with our enrichment children, just to make sure they're familiar with the terminology and things like that. So this is an option at your school as well. All right, and then we start making groupings. We write down similarities of missing skills with students, and then we will group those students by skill. And then step 4 is probably my favorite, is creating your schedule. And then we just go in and start adding students to groups. And thankfully, this year we're splitting first and second grade. So last year I mostly just had second grade, and the other interventionist, she had first grade. And then I picked up most of kindergarten by myself. And this year we're doing like a split, and that kind of works out. So I have somebody to plan with, but we go in and make that. So once you have your groups, you can go in and organize your groups. So I like to go into ESGI and just type in the name of what it is. I do have one reading group, like I told y'all. So I'll just type in reading group, and then any assessments I need to go will go here under their little grouping. And then, I'll make a tab for the reading group. And then I go in and start adding in all of my groups. But in actuality, it'll say like teacher's name, or it may be, let's say Brown, if there's another teacher Brown. It may say Brown's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Brown's Tuesday, Thursday, or Brown's intervention, Brown's enrichment, You can name it however you want to, or if you see children Monday through Friday, it could just be that teacher's name, just depending on how you do it. I go in and type in everybody's name on the side. And then I go in and start adding students. Now, I do want to talk about this because I had to ask ESGI before I started doing this. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't messing with our teachers' assessments because our students' names are automatically put in for everybody, if I'm not mistaken. And I didn't want my assessments to be on the teachers, and I'm sure they don't want to see my stuff. And I also use some of their assessments when I need to. I didn't want to mess up their data. So I go in and I retype everybody's name in. So if you go through Student Manager, you will see the child's name in there twice. Perfectly fine. Nobody's gonna die, but it keeps it so everything is separate. So my intervention and my enrichment data is separate from the teacher's data, if that makes sense. So we just keep that separate. All right, and then I go in and I add new tabs for my groups, like I said, and I don't name it like this, but I may say enrichment for first grade, and then enrichment for second grade, and then intervention for first grade, and then intervention for second grade. And so then they each have a tab, and I go in and I add all of my assessments there. And hopefully that was a decent explanation. But y'all, the specialist account is just chef's kiss because the way that I can group everybody and have all of my students, and then I can just click on the teacher and just see those kids, love it. Because I'm not very organized, and this helps to keep me organized. So you can go to ESGI and get your free trial. Just use the code ENCHANTED. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about intervention and things that we're going to do with intervention. So I want to say the most important thing that you can do is being intentional with what you're about to teach and what you are teaching with your students. So I just said I'm not very organized, and this is pure facts that I am not very organized. And so one thing that I have to have is something to keep up with all of my papers. So I have an intervention binder. We're calling it a binder, but it's really not a binder. It's just where I have put all of my papers for all of my groups together. And you can see it's pretty thick. It's for the next few weeks, and then I'll switch that out for more. But it's how I keep up with all of my notes, my attendance, my lesson plans. Literally everything is in this intervention, dare I say, Bible, because it's pretty much what it is. Now, this log, we have one for enrichment and intervention, and I cannot take credit for this. This is my genius math interventionist buddy who I work with. She started doing this last year. I was doing something else, and then when we started talking to this year, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to use what you use. And so one piece of paper is for 4 weeks because it's something on the back too. But all I do is go in, put the student's name, the teacher's name, and then this is all her genius idea, she does those 2x2 labels, and we print the standard and whatever activity we're working on, and then just go in and put those, so I don't have to handwrite it, or if something changes or whatever, I can just rewrite. But this is already made, and then as students change, these are already created for us for as long as we want to, and then we can print them out. And we went ahead and put in like holidays and things like that, so we can just kind of see. But I'm able to put if they're present, their progress they've made, are they attentive. It's just so much easier to keep notes, because last year I did try to do it digitally, so I was like stuck at my computer the whole time, or when my groups are back to back, it was just hard to go in and type everybody's. But this was so much easier to do, and at the end of the week we can just check if they were able to work independently. Did they need some support? Like, were they successful with support, or were they not able to accomplish anything with support? And y'all, I already love this like to death. This is like the best thing ever that I could have done. All right, so first, let's talk about reading. And I know I said I don't want to do reading, but you may be a teacher who is teaching intervention, so I couldn't leave it out because I do love reading. I just don't like what we do for intervention at school for reading. So I had a principal, my previous principal, he always said small groups is where the magic happens, and that is completely true. So let's go real quick through a routine of what you can do for small groups if you're pulling small groups, especially if you are a K-1 or 2 teacher. Excuse me. All right, so I have been letters trained. I went through phonics first training. And so a lot of this is what I learned from there. And I've done a ton of trainings over the years. So I'm very lucky to have been to some really great trainings. So the first thing is 3-part drill. You want to make sure you're doing a visual, auditory, and some type of blend. And then go over a new skill, or you can review a skill. And then I try to get in dictation every day and read some type of text. So a visual can just be showing the letters. It can be with a keyword, without keyword, but they should be able to letter is, sound is, and if needed, they can say the keyword, but then eventually you want to move away from having a keyword in front of them. I also like to do some type of visual. This isn't like an everyday anything, but when I had my own class, we would do this whole group, and just to give them a way to visually see how the letters are formed. And you can just do this quick in the same little motion as you're doing the rest of this. If you are doing small group, you can already just have it up on your computer and then just click through. And then once you get through showing the letters, saying the letters, and then whatever letter you are working on, you can show just that letter. And then we like to do a auditory drill, and this is just reviewing sounds. You could eventually move to VC words, that's vowel consonant, and then eventually go to CVC and move on depending on the age of students that you have. But this is just where you are producing the sound and then your students are writing it. Now, I did add this sand trait because we got these when I was phonics first trained. And let me tell you, it was the best sand. It's like magic. It has something in it. I don't know what it is, but it's amazing. If you can get your hands on it, highly recommend to use that sand. But you can do the same thing with rice, salt, shaving cream. It's just to give them another way to feel it, and it's a multi-sensory approach. You can also do this with just whiteboards or chalkboards if you don't have anything for them to actually put their fingers in and move their fingers, but you are just producing the sound and then they are writing it. You can also do a vowel intensive. And so this is where you give them 2 or more vowels to choose between. And so I always start out with VC first. As I may say, if I give them an A and an I will say the word is at. And then they have to figure out, does it have an A in it or does it have an I in it? And they're listening at, and they hear that at, so they're going to pick up the A. You can do this with popsicle sticks. It doesn't have to be these little card tents. It could be anything you want to. And then as your students progress to CBC words, then you can start doing CBC words because they're able to hear that. And then you can start adding more vowels. And those are just little popsicle sticks. Something I do with the popsicle sticks, I do write it on all 4 sides. So when they're holding it up to me, I can see the letter, but they also can see the letter. So if I'm saying my word is cat, and then they're holding up that A, they're able to see an A, I'm able to see an A. Or if they have it flipped upside down, they're still able to see it. It just kind of keeps it very easy because then they're like, oh, what letter is this? I just try to avoid any type of interruptions for them and just move on. And then you want to do blending. With phonics first, I also had a blending board, but I don't actually use the blending board. And so I just hold up words or just put them down on the table. So we are building and making words, or you can just, I've seen people do them in a binder, and they just, with the 3 holes, and they just flip the cards and make words. This is what research says is the basic progression with how you should be teaching. So, of course, if you teach kindergarten, you're going to start with short vowels and then move on to VC words and then CVC words, then eventually go to short vowels with blends, short vowels with digraphs, final E, long vowels, and then further on. And then I want to make sure my students are reading some type of text if we have time, and you want to make sure you're doing decodable text. And so if they are at the point where they can read a passage, I will give them a passage. But if you're teaching kindergarten, of course, they will not be ready to read passages. You can do simple sentences and try to keep it short, but I want to make sure they can decode majority of the words that are in the sentence. If you have students who are not able to read full sentences yet, it's totally okay. I still want them to read something, so I will give them just letter strips, and then they can practice just going down, saying the letters, going down, telling me the sounds, but they are still practicing. And then once they're ready, I can do like a VC strip instead, and it's just VC words, so that we can go down and try to make those sounds in 2-letter words. And then hopefully they'll be ready to do CVC words. And then while you're reading text, you may want to do some decoding prompts. And this is just when your students are struggling to decode a word. So these are some things that you may want to tell them. Check the vowel sound, look at the word, tap the sounds, blend the sounds, read the parts that you know, split the syllables. And I like to use these little decoding prompt posters, and it just kind of helps them jog their memory on what to do. I've even printed them like super small and just made them into a little strip and laminated it so they have them going straight down so they can kind of look and say, okay, I'm not sure what this word is. Let me try some of these strategies. And this has helped a lot of my kids who struggle with decoding. All right. Hopefully, if you are a reading interventionist, that little part helps, but there is tons and tons that I could share, and there's just not enough time. All right, so let's move over to math. We're going to talk some math activities first, and then we're going to go into one other little thing. All right, so some of the things that I absolutely love doing with math, and this is probably why I prefer math over reading, is to do lots of hands-on, lots of seasonal, lots of different, because I can in small group. And this Feed Me game, you can actually do with reading or with math. And I love the dollar store. I love the dollar spot. I love Dollar General. Anything that is like cheap, I'm there. It's all mine. And so I found these little cups in Dollar Tree, and I'm gonna say there were like a stack of them, but it was a $1.25 store now. But I use these for Feed Me's. So if you are teaching reading, then this is something you can also do with pictures and vowel sounds, or pictures and they're listening for a consonant sound, or if you're teaching digraphs. And so you can have pictures on the table and you're saying feed the bunny the sh sound, and then they can look. There may be a truck, there may be a chip, there may be ship, so then they have to find the ship and feed the ship. You can do the same thing with math. Sometimes when I'm practicing just counting and things like that with kindergarten, I have them to feed a certain amount. So then they're constantly counting. All right, and then we dump it out. Now feed the bunny 7 carrots. And then I may just have some little carrots for them to feed. Just anything to keep it different and fun. I printed off, I just made a little road on my computer, printed it off. And we used this last year when we were really struggling with subtraction. And so I had them to read and roll with the car, and they had to just tell me the answer. So they go 4 minus 4, They would stop the car though. I went a little faster in the video. 4 minus 4 equals 0. 4 minus 0 equals 4. And then once we have practiced enough, I go back in ESGI and I assess. So I try to make sure I am assessing as much as possible. And I know it sounds like I'm testing a lot, but I got to be 100% sure that they can do these skills on their own. Also, a Dollar Tree find is this little pet shop. And on the bottom of it, I just put some numbers and some dots. We use these to match up numbers and counting. I found these ice cream bowls in Dollar Tree as well. And this is something I also use for counting, but you could use this with words. You can use this with addition, subtraction. If you're teaching place value, you can also do these with place value and then the base 10 blocks. So they would have to, like if the number was 67, they would have to put the base 10 of those, put those inside of it. And so that's something that I can work on with second grade. So even though I use this with kindergarten, I can take this same idea and just switch the skill and use it with a higher grade of students. Probably my most favorite thing ever are these water bottles. And so I made these a long time ago and I remade them recently, but we do this a lot for adding. This works great with kindergarten and first grade. Just another way in small group that you all can practice adding. You also can do these with subtraction. I put 2 dice in there, but you could do 1 if you have students who struggle. So you could just do 1, and I put glitter just to make it fun. If glitter is confusing for some of them or it is a distraction, you can do it without glitter. But they just hold the bottle up, they shake it, and then whatever the dot cube falls on, that's the number they write. And then they do it again, and then they write that one. So for adding, it may be 6 plus 3. Then they add 6 plus 3 is 9. Just a different way to get them to practice, because I will tell you, when they're coming to you all the time just to practice adding, it gets boring, like quickly. Another one we do is a rolled and build towers. Now, this is something you also can adapt and make it a little bit harder depending on the age group of your kids. And I've done this in different ways depending on what the kids need to work on. So one way I like to do it is the kids will roll a dot cube and then they take a cube and put it on top of that number. Now, this is for children who they need to stop there, and it's just matching it up. So a 5 match with a 5. Then we roll again, they get a 3, they put it on top of 3. Now if you have children who are ready to build, then if they can keep going and build up to 3, and so then we stop that number. You can't build anymore if you have 3 in your tower on top of a 3. Now those children are a bit more advanced, obviously. Now if you have second grade or older grades, you can do this with base 10 blocks and 2 dot cubes. Of course, I would make these numbers a little bit higher, and there probably more numbers on here because they would try to roll those numbers and get those numbers to build with base 10 blocks. You can also do some subitizing with rec and recs. We won't go into super detail about that, but it is another option that I love using during intervention. We also do a more or less war. I love this because also depending on the grade I have, first, second, we can change these. I do have some students within the next couple of weeks, we will be working on 10 more, 10 less. And so I can do war with them. All you need for this is cards and a spinner. So they will spin, they'll get more or less, and then each child pulls a card, and then we'll do 10 more or 10 less. So I'll say take 10 off or add 10 to yours, and then they'll get a new number. Or if I just have, let's say first grade who's not ready to do that, they may spin, flip over their cards. Someone may have a 14, depending on what kind of cards you give them. 14, some of them may have 12. If they spun them more, the person who has more wins. It's just super simple. You just need some cards. And I do like to print mine off. I have some 10 frame cards that I use for kindergarten and first grade. For second grade, you can print off something with base 10 on it. You can have a model drawn out on the cards, and then they have to figure out what's 10 more, what's 10 less. Or if they're ready, you can do 100 more, 100 less, depending on the skill that your students need to work on. You can do the same idea with dominoes, doing one less, but I just have them to match up the end of the dominoes with one more, one less. And then this tug of numbers, y'all, a absolute favorite. You can email me and I'll send you this little strip to make the tug of numbers, but you just need a little game mat, a dot cube, and one token. And so if you've never seen the game before, I'm just gonna use a pen as my token. So they started in the middle, they roll, and then one person goes over, let's say if they got a 5, they go over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then the other partner rolls. If they got 2, they move it backwards. 1, 2. And so it's basically going back and forth as a tug of numbers until one person gets to the end or gets off of the mat. So this game could take a long time, especially depending on how long you make this little mat that their little cube is on or whatever you use. But it is a lot of fun and it's a lot of laughs, and kids love this game. All right. We're gonna skip the hours of that one, and we're gonna skip real quick into a number talks. Something else you can do during intervention is you could start, it doesn't have to be every session that you do, but you can start every other session with number talks. If you've never read the book, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It is just a fabulous thing to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of number talks, but something that we like to do is have our students say the language and use some of those examples. So as your students are talking and talking about numbers, we just kind of encourage them to say, I agree with Samantha because, or how did you decide to, I disagree with, and it kind of gives them to, because sometimes they do agree with the other person, but they don't know what to say, or you give them a turn to talk and they're like, and this just kind of helps them to have a place to communicate and talk out. So with number talks, it is highly encouraged that they share and respond to other strategies. And this is just something great that you can do in small group. So let's try a few, and I'm going to pretend like I can hear you all. So I'm just going to imagine. So this is what you would do. You would say, the teacher says, how many dots do you see? And then you just go ahead and ask, how do you see them? So this is something you can even do with pre-K. So first question, how many dots do you see? This is easy. For pre-K, they'll probably have to count them. For even some kindergartners who aren't able to quickly do that, they'll say 4. And then how do you see them? Someone may say in a straight line. They may say they're next to each other. Then you can do it like that. How many dots do you see? And they'll say 4. Well, how do you see them? And then this kind of starts the conversation of how they see them. And then once your students are ready for more, you'll build up to more. And then you can just keep doing them. So every day I would do this and have the same amount, but in different arrangements. And so once they're ready and they're able to move on, then you'll just keep moving on to more and more. So then this particular day, you'd say, well, how many dots do you see? They have to count them. They say 10. By this time, they may be able to tell you, oh, there's 5 on this side and 5 on that side. Or they may see them as there's 4 at the top, there's 2 in the middle, and there's 4 at the bottom. Or they may see them in another arrangement. But this just gives opportunities and gives your students a way to talk and discuss different arrangements. You can do the same thing with a rec and rec, and then just have them in different ways. Super simple. You can also do them with 10 frames. Now, I do like to do these with printed 10 frames too, and you can just do this small group. So you really could do all of this small group with something printed, but it's easier if it's just digital, and I can just move the dot every day or move the little rec and rec over or just make a different arrangement. But same thing. So for the 10 frame, how many do you see? 7. How do you see them? Someone may say 3 at the top and 4 at the bottom, or they see them in 4 and 3. Just depends on how your students are there. Sometimes you may have to share how you see them, but I really try to keep it to my kids, and usually they're able to, tell you, especially when you start a little bit easier with your kids. And then you just go through different combinations of 7. It's just so simple, right? All right. So, very last thing, if you do nothing else, I say create an intervention notebook to keep all of your things in the same place. So you're better than Keri. Don't be like me. Be better than Keri. Keep everything together and assess often. So after your students have times to practice, go in ESGI, create an assessment, or you can go and look for an assessment, especially if you already have things made for you. I used to take a lot of my district assessments and I would just put them in ESGI because it's so much easier for me. And then all my data's in one place. We didn't even talk about reports or anything like that, but there are tons of reports, tons of graphs, tons of information on there that could be a whole nother topic on how you can go in and look at all of that data. So if you have any questions on using ESGI, you can absolutely reach out to me or to anyone from ESGI. Here is my email again. It is Keri@enchantedkindergarten.com. Or again, you can message me on Instagram or on Facebook. So hopefully now we are friends for life, and you are going to message me and tell me how much you love using ESGI with intervention, or if you're a SPED teacher or any type of specialist, because you're gonna go and get your free trial using the code Enchanted, and then let me know how much you love it. All right, hope y'all have a great night.
Thank you so much, Keri, for all this information that you presented to us today. Now, you heard how Keri uses her specialist account in her district. I wanted to give you one more idea of using your specialist account, so you get a little bonus today. Well, Keri talked about how in her district, they did not want to combine the data for the students who are in intervention and the students who are in the homeroom teachers. But if you do desire to do that, instead of adding another student to ESGI, you can go to the student manager. You can find the student and you can assign that student to your specialist group here. Now, if you do that, when you assess as a specialist, the homeroom teacher also will get that data in their ESGI home account. So I just want you to know that there are 2 ways you can add additional students, although sometimes we don't want to do that because then there's extra students in ESGI. But if you want to combine them, go to the student manager and add them here. Okay? We thank you for being an ESGI teacher, but if you have not yet tried ESGI, do as Keri said and sign up for a free 60-day trial using the promo code ENCHANTED. Thanks again, Keri, and thank you, everyone. Have a good night.